Yo, good morning. What's up? My name's Patrouski. I just woke up, Baja Blast in hand, and I wanted to wake up and talk about a specific topic and make a video talking about it. It's a very, very common one I see in Pokemon, and I think a lot of people have unanswered questions, and I would really like to present both sides of the argument today here. Well, hopefully you think I do so, and if you do enjoy your time here, if I entertain you during your Pokemon shunts or grinds or whatever you may be doing, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe. It does help me out a ton. First things first, let's address the issue. The topic at hand, why adding legendaries is mostly bad to PokeMMO. I appreciate any charitability given during this discussion. There's a lot of caveats to give. Mostly bad is a super important thing. There are some ways, or actually a way that I've heard to implement them that actually could work, and I'll get to that at the very end. But first things first, I want to preface, not all legendaries are built equal. Virizion isn't on the same level as something like Landorus T. Not every legendary would be extremely broken in PvP or extremely broken in PvM, but something that happens is once you add one legendary, you no longer have a reason to add the rest, and it sort of becomes this, slippery slope, as much as I hate to use that, but it essentially becomes an issue of that for the most part. There's a lot of different ways that legendaries are broken, and a lot of different things to factor in when wanting to add them. One of the first things being PvM. A lot of people, when they hear, oh, why not just, when they hear legendaries aren't in the game, they say, why not just add legendaries, but just ban them from PvP? That would fix everything. And it's, okay, no, it doesn't. That's like the first thought process, right? So you think through that, and then you go to the next one. So the reason why that doesn't work is because in PvM, PokeMMO is an MMO, right? When you have things like money-making methods, when you have things like gym reruns, when you have things like catching Pokemon and everything like that, when all of that relies on money, and that costs money, and that makes money, adding legendaries essentially changes the metagame for everything. It essentially buffs everything. It essentially makes the way you earn money. It increases the speed at which people would make Pokeyen. If people could use legendary for gym reruns, it would increase the speed at which people can do Elite Four reruns. It would increase the speed that people would be able to do Battle Tower, etc., etc. Everything is impacted. PokeMMO is such a large, diverse, in-depth game that once you add one thing, it affects everything. And adding a legendary and having it be usable in PvM would totally break and change the metagame. And change isn't necessarily bad, but I do think it would just be a buff for no reason. And I am not in favor of that. So PvM, it's broken. PvP, it's obviously broken. Legendaries, once again, not all built equal, but legendaries are pretty inherently broken in Pokemon PvP. Like, they're pretty much added as a gimmick for kids, right? We all agree with that. They're this one of, super legendary, unique Pokemon that you can catch in the world. And that's why it's super cool and fun. And like, whenever you find your first legendary or your first couple legendaries in the traditional Pokemon games, it feels super special. It feels super unique. But when it comes to balancing them in the PvP, like serious competitive metagame, it's a pain in the ass. And Game Freak doesn't want to do it. And it's not fun. It's not good. They always ramp over They always ramp over PvP, and they always drown out PvP Pokemon. Obviously, not always the case. It's not like you're not going to see like 6 legendaries aren't ever going to be like the best team, pretty much. That's pretty rare. Like, there's a reason why like legendary spammers are a term. Like, that gets a little ridiculous. That's like not even an optimal team at that point. But in general, we can all agree legendary Pokemon are just stronger. They have much, much higher base stat totals, which is very important. Base stat totals don't make up everything. What makes it powerful? There's plenty of low base stat total powerful Pokemon, things like Quagsire, but once again, some charitability. Legendaries are just inherently much, much stronger. So it's really hard to balance them in PvP. It's also important to note that in PokeMMO, we don't really have an Ubers tier. In fact, the devs try to keep everything out of the Ubers tier that is possible. They actually just banned Delayed to the Ubers tier, and I'm really certain they'll try to remove that or find some way to bring it out of that because they don't want that to be the case. Whenever they've added Pokemon to Ubers in the past, they try relentlessly to get them out of Ubers, since Ubers isn't actually a playable tier within the game. If a Pokemon is banned to Ubers, it's essentially a death sentence. It means it's just not usable in PvP. You can't queue for Ubers. You can't play Ubers. Like, it's not a thing that is in PokeMMO. It's just a ban list, essentially. And one of the biggest things, now we're getting a little late in this video, but one of the biggest things that people forget, and I hinted at it earlier with legendaries, is that the whole point of legendaries in a Pokemon MMO, or Pokemon in general, is that there's only supposed to be one of them in the world. One of the worst feelings in the world is being a new player to a Pokemon MMO, going to the main hub region like Vermilion City and PokeMMO, and just seeing everyone have a Zapdos and Mewtwo behind them. It feels extremely cheesy and, to me, quite cringe. That's just my personal preference. Other people may love it. Now, I'm not opposed to going to a high-level area and seeing high-level players with high-level things. That's totally fine. The issue is everyone in their absolute nan can get a legendary. They're not difficult to get, right? At least in like the traditional games. Like you just go to the end game. You just do the storyline, right? And that's like where the game begins in PokeMMO. So the social aspect gets really cheesy, really silly. I think it just looks gross if everybody has legendary. I think it just is not fun. It doesn't fit the lore of Pokemon, which we don't have to abstain to lore. I more so prefer to abstain to balance, but you get the point. And this brings us to one of the only ways that I've actually heard to implement legendaries in a pretty usable way. They would have to be not usable in PvP, not usable in PvM, and an extremely rare wild encounter, even rarer than what they are now in the wild for like the King of the Hill style minigame. I'm talking like 1 out of 300,000 or 1 out of 500,000, like single encounter. And that would essentially make the legendary just a social status symbol, but one that is difficult to achieve. So you would go to Vermilion, even as a veteran player. If it was like 1 out of 500k or even 1 out of 300k single encounters, even as a veteran player, you would go to Vermilion and you'd be like, damn, that guy has a Zapdos. You know, like it'd be pretty sick. Like, and it wouldn't be a usable Pokemon once again. NPV, there'd be no pragmatic benefit aside from the social flex, which is totally fine. I think a lot of people get way too caught up on like pragmatic benefits in MMOs or just in games or just sometimes in thought process in general, and not everything needs to have that pragmatic benefit. Look at things like vanities, right? Look at things like cosmetics. Look at things like other MMOs have. There's tons of reasons. Look at things like a diamond, you know, in IRL human life. Just a cosmetic. It's just like a ring, a piece of jewelry. People like to show things off. People like to flex. People like to express themselves. People like to choose favorite rocks, gems, favorite Pokemon, etc. And if your favorite Pokemon is Zapdos and you want to spend, hundreds of hours hunting for one in the wild, more power to you. I think that's a really cool workaround. I think that's the best way to implement that I've heard. It doesn't impact PvP in a negative way, doesn't impact PvM, doesn't impact the social standing or like the social negative too, which social stuff is really important when talking about MMO. I don't want to like undercut that or undervalue that. People seem to just brush it off or play PokeMMO as a single player experience, which I tend to do, but it's still important to look at the game as a social phenomenon. It's an MMO. It's massively multiplayer. We're always seeing each other and it's important. One of the last points that I do want to talk on is with this implementation option, with the one I just talked about, where it's an extremely rare wild encounter, would that actually solve the issue? Would less people complain? And what I mean by that is, would the same people who are asking people to add, the devs to add legendaries, would they like that implementation? And my answer is probably not. I think that most people who are asking for legendaries in PokeMMO are pretty casual players. Nothing wrong with that. But I think it comes from a, hey, I really like legendaries. I really want to play this Pokemon MMO. They're not in this game. Man, that stinks. I don't like that. I mean, they're not going to play, or I'm going to be bummed about that, which is like fair. But you have to understand what's best for the game versus what is best for your personal self or your personal goals, right? There are a lot of things that are good for the game in PokeMMO that may not be the best for me, or maybe like I don't care about. One that I always talk about is like dungeons / like raids or like endgame PvM for PokeMMO. That's not something that I care about. That's not something that I need. I'm happy and content to just sit here and shiny hunt on dumb little alt accounts like this until the day that I die, because it's what I enjoy. It's really fun. It's stupid. I know, I get it. But most people want some sort of endgame PvM content to go to. And I think it'd be really, really good for the game for the devs to do that. Even though it would take away, like, quote unquote, take away dev time from things that, quote unquote, I want. I don't care. It's better for the game if they do that, if that's what most players want. Now, it's important to not always do what the players want, but what's best for the game. And that's a whole nother discussion. And those can go hand in hand or can conflict. And that gets a little complicated. Obviously, if everybody wanted the shiny rate to be 1 out of 10K or 1 out of 1K, that wouldn't be a good change. That would destroy the system. But anyways, I think there's probably, back to my original point, people would still complain, but would it be less? It's scary when you say something like, oh, people would still complain, so you just shouldn't do that. That's not a good argument, because that becomes really vacuous. You could use that for every single argument in the entire world, right? But would it be significantly less people complaining to where it's actually worth implementing? That's the question that I don't know the answer to. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm not sure, but that's it. That's my little video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I think it'd be cool to see Legendaries implemented in a super rare, unique way. I also think it'd be cool to not see them implemented. I don't really care too much, but whatever the players want, whatever the devs think is best, these are my thoughts in my little brain, my little opinions. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for daily PokeMMO videos. Follow the Twitch for streams Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. ET. Discord's down below if you care about that. And if you want to go above and beyond, support the channel, YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, and PayPal, Venmo, all that stuff helps out a ton. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time, and I hope you felt as though I represented these points accurately. Have a great day. Peace.